Kal Halalim Leihau Bashim Yaoshai, Bashim Rakaha Kudash. Double honors unto the apostles of GMS, who rule well and who I learned this truth from, and salutations and blessings unto the hopeful elect. Akim and a few Aquathium take heed. This is from a book called When Scotland Was Jewish, right up above here. I went into this book a few lessons ago, dealing with the Gauls and the Franks and Scythians, and I found some other information that I wanted to bring out. I'm going to start. Let's see. Basically here, the small print from Spain. All right, this is from, what is this, page 72. It says, from Spain they took a merchant ship bound for the coast of Scotland. They landed in a place called Solway Firth. Right? And it says, and finding the country Scotland in peace under the Protestant reign of King James VI, which King James, he was the sixth of Scotland, who then became King James I, King of England. That time period was known as the Jacobean dynasty. Really, it was the Icobean. It was really I. There was no J until a little bit later. And James is a English derivative of actually Jacob. So his name was really Jacob, and he was of the Stuart line, right? And the word Stuart goes back to the word Svart, which means dark. All right, the Stuarts. It says they determined to settle there. After finding a large landholder, he being a wealthy bishop of the place, they purchased from him a large estate. They then sent back to their native land for other relatives and friends, and in a few years became numerous and prosperous. But in order to acquire full title to this land, it was necessary that they should gain the consent and signature of the king to their purchase. The king, upon signing their titles, imposed the following conditions: that the three brothers should, when the king required it, each send a son with a troop of 20 men to aid in the wars of the king. Our forefathers were of dark skin, with deep penetrating eyes and high foreheads. Although naturally of dark complexion, in mingling with the blue-eyed belles of Scotland through 13 generations, the younger generations have shown many instances of the fair hair and blue eyes of the mother's family. Thus the blue eyes and the black eyes appear in almost every family. And that's just going into a little history of Israelites mixing. Right? They said the blue-eyed belles of Scotland, the woman, right? And that's why people get messed up over the appearance, right? It's something called a phenotype. If you look that up, phenotype. You have phenotype and you have genotype. In Esau's biology, right? It says, let me see, because sometimes they go into the DNA. All right. Let me go to the next thing I had saved. It says here, now they go into the different family names in this book, which I like. Here they talk about the Cohens. All right. So it says, I'll go to the point down here. It says Alexander McCowan was born in Scotland and moved to Tyrone, Ireland. His 6 sons came to America in 1728 from Tyrone, Ireland. They were called the Blacks and the Reds. because 3 of them had black hair and dark eyes and dark complexion. The other 3 had red hair and light complexion. The sons named were James, Alexander, Moses, George, Malcolm, and John. You know, and that's just a little interesting snippet there, right? Of more, you know, clear description that they were dark. You know, you don't hear about that, about dark skinned Irish, because when you know, majority of people, when they think of Ireland, you know, people that don't study or research, right, they just think, oh, that's just pasty so-called white people. But guess what? You have a lot of those people that look like Edomites. They got so-called black, you know, I'll use that term, black lineage, man. And that's why the Irish are known as the niggas of Europe, right? There was a movie like that. I forget the name, man, but the Apostles, they recommended it years ago, and you know, when you watch it, the dude, it's about like an Irish musical band, a small band of friends. You know, they have a band, you know, like a music band. But the guys are like, look, the Irish are the blacks of Europe. You know, so he's like, so say it with me, lads. I'm black and I'm proud. I forget the name of that movie, man. That was a good movie. But that's the thing, right? Black Irish. You know, that's actually a term, and people are like, oh, what does that mean? Check this out, right? This is craftsmen and seamen. Jews coming to Scotland from Iberia, which, what does Iberia mean? Iberia, you have a thing called the Iberian Peninsula, right? Which encompasses land and islands, or continent and islands, right? Iberian means, goes back to Ibar, which is Hebrew, the Hebrew Peninsula. You have the Azores, you know, Portugal, Spain, right? Jews coming to Scotland from Iberia during the 14 and 1500s and later carried with them an ample store of what sociologists termed cultural capital. They had valuable knowledge and skills, and this was not talking about Khazars, Amalek. Amalek didn't, hold on, what was this time? 14. Amalek was just learning to wipe his ass, man. All right, excuse the you know, the graphic expression, but Amalek, this was not Amalek, man. You know, Amalek was coming up in the power during this time, right? But who had this valuable knowledge? The Israelites, right? And skills that were incalculable assets to the countries where they settled, notably medical, metallurgical, which is what, alchemy and blacksmith and things like that, mining, sailing, leatherworking, glass making, and mercantile expertise. Unlike their Christian cohorts, European and Middle Eastern Jews of even modest means in the early modern period also possessed literacy and numeracy, the two requirements for running a business. Some of the craft guilds in Western Scotland kept records of these specialties beginning in the 1600s, and it is to an examination of these that we now turn, right? Now, let's see, this is from same book, page 36. Now, this is going again into a bunch of mixed history. It's just going into how the pieces to the puzzle, you know, like brothers always ask, well, how did the Israelites spread into Europe, and which, you know, it's a lot of history, right? So these are just pieces to when you read certain things, because when you read certain narratives that Esau writes, he'll write it from the angle of, it's obviously him trying to say that it was Esau, right? What else is he going to say? So when you find information that mentions, oh, they had dark complexion, right? They come from so-called black lineage, right? That matters, right? Of course, for the truth's sake. It says, let me see. I'll start here. The Caldwell-Stewart allele configuration, which were two big families, Caldwell and Stewart, right? then likely arose during in the Middle Ages, 500 to 1500 AD, or the late Roman Empire, 1500 AD. Since 500 AD, some of the descendants would have moved from their ancestral home while some remained behind. We believe the only people who had contact with all these relevant populations within the appropriate time period were the Germanic tribes. Now, Germanic goes back to what? What does the word Germanic mean? It means genuine, right? The Germanic, a lot of those Germanic people were Israelites, if not all, you know? That originated in the far north of Western Europe and overran the Roman Empire from the 4th. When you watch Gladiator, right? In the beginning, that's who they're fighting, the Germanic in the woods. The Germanic tribes, they're conquering them, right? There's different movies, man. I think it's called Legions or Legion, if I'm not mistaken. And there's another one, but it shows that time period where it was the Eastern, I believe, Roman Empire fell, the Germanic tribes, and I believe you only had the Western, right? Roman Empire. It says, overran the Roman Empire from the 4th to 6th centuries of the Common Era. They came from the Baltic and harried the borders of the empire in Thrace, Hungary, and Pannonia. They are called the Goths, which were Israelites. I'm very sorry. Look, you see the map, Gothland, right up there where Denmark and Switzerland, all high north places are, right? We pick up the Caldwell-Stewart haplotype trail in Volhynia or Ukraine, the ancestral home of the Goths before their division into Visigoths and Ostrogoths, right? And this is a good map here, because again, you have, look, Iberia, where it's supposed to say what? Spain and Portugal. It was just called Iberia, Hebrew. It wasn't Hebrew Edomites. It was Hebrew Israelites, right? It says, Gothic legends tell of a migration from the mouth of the Vistula of the Sea of Azov that took them through a vast swamp in crossing a river, probably the Dnieper. Some of their people became separated from the main group and were left behind. In the words of one historian, old songs tell the story of the trek of the Goths from Gothen Sanza to Scythia, right? And the Apostle Har made that video on the Scythians, and that's why it's specifically Paul mentioned barbarian, which means basically a rude or ignorant person, which is a categorization. There was no land called the land of Barbaria. Greek, to the Greek, right? There's a reason why. And to the Scythian, specifically because there was an over-representation of Israelites, clearly, during that time. Modern archaeology assumes a slow shift of the East Pomeranian Masovian Welbark culture into the archaeological region that has been named since the turn of the century after the village of Cherniakov near Kiev, which is in Ukraine. The advance of the Polish culture into the Ukrainian area thus presents itself as a process that lasted from the end of the 2nd until far into the 3rd century. To this stage belongs also the early phase of the Cherniakov culture in Volhynia or Volhynia. The left behind stayed in an area that eventually became the medieval state of the Ukraine. The largest group of Goths continued to travel over 1,000 miles to the Grutengian heartland in southern Russia, where the peoples of the Cherniakov culture certainly had the military and logistic capability to enforce their authority in the vast expanses of Russia. So now you're talking about Goths going into Russia, and that's why it's clear that Israelites ruled in those lands in the medieval times, man. That 1,000-year period that the scriptures speak about in Revelations 20. There, the Gothic king ruled over all peoples of Scythia and Germania as if they were his own, from the farthest eastern point they turned west, now being named Visigoths, right? And that's that history, man. And then this last part here, the Douglases, man, which is another family, renowned family of Scotland, right? This noble Scots family first appeared in Britain around 1300 and settled on the Scottish border. One standard reference book observes that the Douglases were one of Scotland's most powerful families, and it is therefore remarkable that their origins remain obscure, right? It says, we have seen in chapter 2 that the Douglases have many branches, but all seem to agree in being originally Gothic, man. Right? So that shows you. What did we read about with the Goths, and then they split into the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths, and they went all around where did they start from? Ukraine, they went to Russia, right? Now they went westward. So these were all Israelites. Let me see. It says the name Douglas means dark stranger in Gaelic and may have originated from the Mediterranean complexions of the family's founders. The black Douglas is so named for their dark coloring. Mediterranean, what are they trying to say? Olive tan? No, man, they're dark skin. Jakes, Israelites, so-called black, so you can understand. Right? The name Douglas means dark stranger in Gaelic and may have originated from the Mediterranean complexions of the family's founders. The Black Douglases, so named for their dark coloring, who were the dominant force on the border between England and Scotland from 1300 to 1455. Right? Family portraits attest to their ancestral Mediterranean physiognomy, right? Or physiognomy, right? Esau and his different new speak words, man. But as you see, Gothland, this is just some information, man. Homeland of the Goths, right? And that's more research for me and the brothers, to do on the history of all this, So I hope you're edified. All right. Kahalayim la Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, Bahashim Rachaha Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of GMS, once again, who rule well, and shalom to the elect.